Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. This is episode 59. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. Hope you had a great weekend. Happy Monday. Beautiful day here in the Dominican. A lot to cover in this podcast, and we're going to talk about some personal stuff and how it relates to sports betting. So this is going to be a very eye-opening podcast. I think there'll be a ton of educational value that comes from this. So over the weekend, I read this book by Aaron Clarey. I wouldn't really say he's in the manosphere. Let me say that. I wouldn't really say he's black pill or red pill, but he's more of a more of a realist, which I am as well. And he has a book titled The Menu. And what The Menu is, it's a book about the reality of marriage and the reality of how you're going to live your life. Divorce rate, as we know, is 50%. And then of the people that are married, the other half, whatever number you want to use is correct. He estimates there's probably only 14% of those people that are in marriages are actually happy. So the whole premise of the book is you have to accept the fact that most people are going to live their lives single. That's the reality. So the menu is you're going to have to figure out a steak is not on the menu. Being married is not on the menu. So you're going to have to figure out how to live your life in reality. And most people don't. So you ask the question, how does that relate to sports betting? In a lot of ways it does, because my whole approach is telling people the unadulterated truth about this business. And very few people actually do that. And if you don't accept the truth, and if you don't accept the reality in sports betting, it makes it even more difficult. And then also it makes it extremely mentally frustrating. And we had a 0 for day last night, and I caught myself being upset and frustrated by it. 0 for 4 in the actual model itself. If we played the full model, it went 0 for 5. So losing days are common. That's part of the business. And I want to explain some reality. And as we know, first off, about sports betting, the majority of people don't win in this business. And if you get on social media, there's this illusion that everybody's making money. And going back to that book by Aaron Clarey, the world will try to pretend like everybody is getting married, everybody's happy in relationships, but the reality is it's a failed model. People that get married, people get divorced 50% of the time. Of those people that are married, majority of people are not happy in that marriage. So you have to figure out a different way to live. So the reality of sports betting is, and I don't think it's emphasized enough, this is a very, very difficult business. And losing days are going to happen. You're going to have to be man enough to accept that. And it's still difficult for me. And what I'm going to show you, we'll actually look at some real numbers. And I think this is going to help you understand regression and understand basically the reality of the business. So let's dive into it. And I want to take a look at soccer first. And we'll give a little bit of backstory. If you're watching this podcast for the first time, I've made a lot of changes I've had a gazillion different models. This is something that's always been difficult for me to cap. And it's a very difficult sport to handicap, regardless of if it's me or anybody else. The reason being is it's a three-sided monster, meaning there is no 50-50 game. There's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Now, the model as we have it, and this is tracking this back from 420. So basically 1 month of data. This is really good. 4 wins, 32 losses, 9.27 units. Okay. Now it had a losing weekend this weekend. If you can see here, I'll highlight this and hopefully you can see this on screen, down 3.8 units. We had San Diego was a bad beat win for us, meaning we got a last second goal. And then we lost 2 matches to the house, as I say, meaning we had 2 last second goals that went against us. Yesterday, just a normal losing day. Now, here's the reality. So when you back up this model, so look at from 425, and I'll highlight this, from 425 all the way down until 517. So less than a month, look at what this model was producing. Look down there in the lower right-hand corner. This model in less than a month was at plus 13.61 units. Phenomenal. But the reality and what you have to expect, you have to anticipate this in reality. You have to anticipate this mentally. It will not maintain that, nor will it sustain that. So the first thing I want to teach, regardless of the sport, whether it's soccer, whether it's NFL, I want to define what a good model is and what you can expect on an average monthly basis. A good model, regardless of the sport, would be about 3 units. A great model would be averaging about 5 units per month. You look at Eric's model with UFC. He, let's see, I think already did this. He was on pace for like 43 units, which is a little bit more than 3 units per month. And that's considered a great model. You look at what we ended up with overall last year at 47 units. That's averaging almost 4 units per month and slightly under that. So a good model, regardless of the sport, is about 3 units. And if it's way more than that, like you're seeing right here, this model here is 13.61 units, have to anticipate regression. Meaning a losing skid is on the horizon. It's just how numbers work. Meaning if you're hitting 60%, you're on a great run, you're on a 15-5 run, you're not going to go 15-5 on your next 20 wagers. It's just not how the business works. It's not how numbers work. You're going to regress. Well, it's called regression to the mean. Meaning if you're way above what's normal, a good model would be 3 to 5 units. Let's just say 3 units. You have a model that's making 13 units. It's going to regress. And that's exactly what happened. Take a look from 518 here down to 525 minus 4.34 units, right? And you look at it, 34 and 32, 9.27 units. If we calculate yearly pace, 9.27 units times 12 would be 111 units. Is that realistic? No, it's not. What is realistic? 3 to 5 units for a good model. So more than likely, how we interpret this data is just having a quote, really, really good month. Now, we're not going to make changes to the model, but we have to anticipate and understand it probably will not maintain this long term. Meaning like it might have a month where it has a losing month, and more than likely it's probably going to average out to that, if it's a good model, 3 to 5 units per month. So mentally, you have to always accept that and understand that, because the reality is it's going to regress, especially if it's above the quote normal average. Let's take a look at Major League Baseball. All right, so if we look at over here at the right-hand side, let me show you what the top 10, playing just the top 6 teams via the baseball model, tracking this from 5-1 to 5-25. This is very realistic. 27 and 21, 4.3 units gained, ROI 8%. That is, quote, very normal for a good model. All right. And again, you have to understand the majority of people lose money, right? So the majority of people that were handicapping building a model, it would be negative. So if you can just get a model to even, and I've talked about this many times back in the old day, if you can get a model to even, just the model itself, you could probably handicap it using some subjective factors to get it above 50% to where it's profitable. Now, I've had a paradigm shift in how I teach and how I approach sports betting to where I want the model to do 100% of the work. So if the model isn't profitable, I'll go back and tweak the model, as opposed to taking the model as is if it's hitting 50% and trying to handicap it subjectively. Objectively would mean factor in home and away, injuries, line movement, etc. So this model, prior to that, let's back up here to the last 2 days. Prior to 524, if you go back and look at this model, it was up 9.84 units. Again, just this short period of time, what have we learned? A good model is going to be 3 units, 3 to 5 units per month. So if you have a model early in the month up 9.84 units, that is not sustainable, my friends. It's going to regress. And that's exactly what happened. And it's very ironic that both models regress. And so from that point, you look at the last 2 days. Yeah, there it is. It went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1 and 6. So in the last 2 days, it was down minus 5.46 units. Even though that sucks in reality, or mentally trying to accept it, you're like, oh, wow, we've had 2 back-to-back losing days. That is the reality of how the business works. And again, also too, when you're assessing something, even though it sucks to have 2 losing days there, it's going to regress. We should realize, hey, this model's up, 9 units. It's going to regress. Now it's regressed back into a quote more realistic picture of what a quote good model looks like. Now, let's slide over to the top 10. And let me mention this one mistake I made this week, and I think this is a good point. A couple times I was caught in between handicapping the top 6 and the top 10. When you have something that works, you want to go all in with that particular model. So I was playing top 6 and then some of the top 10s. And then one day I didn't play all the top 10 teams. And if I would have played it, we would have broke even. And if I would have done it then another day, we would have had a profitable day. Instead, we had 2 losing days. And then, of course, both top 6 and top 10 had over days yesterday. But the point is, or I would say the difficult part of how I handicap, if I got several models going on, you got to pick one and roll. And so really the shift now is I'm going to play top 10 because I believe that gives us the best chance to be profitable long term. And this model has proven that it is based on profit wise long term. But anyway, let's take a look at let's take a look at what it is now. So for about a month and a half, this model is up 19.86 units, way above what a quote good model would be, way above that. 106 and 96. Now, here's in a 9% ROI. All right. So if we go back and let's look at this model from 410. So we'll highlight this from 410 all the way to going into the weekend. Let's run it to, almost a month. All right. So from 410 to 511, this model was up 19.71 units. Fantastic, right? Incredible, but not sustainable. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to track it from 512 until now. So let's see what it does from 512 until now. Even, right? Which is actually pretty good. And so I do think it got even higher than that. It went up to, I was trying to find that where it went up to I think this thing went up to 24. Let me track this from 523 back to 410. Yeah, there we go. Look at that right hand corner, 25.19 units. So this model in a little over a month was up 25.19 units. Again, not sustainable. ROI, not sustainable. Average units is just not. So this is probably a more realistic picture to track this. So if we track it from basically the last 2 days, look what happens the last 2 days, minus 5.3 units. Okay. So important takeaway from all this and a good teaching point is, and I've always wanted to help people understand what success looks like. Again, only 5% of the people that do this business make a profit. Some people will say it's less than that. So a realistic, a good model, or even a good handicapper, what can you expect to make per month? You're probably looking at 3 to 5 units per month. And those of you that are ignorant about sports betting, because a lot of people say, well, I know this one guy, he's consistently made 25 units or et cetera, et cetera. The correct way to grade it when you're looking at units, one play is 1 unit. And I know I've talked about this a gazillion times, but it's important to come back to this point. And what I mean by 1 unit, one play is 1 unit. That's how this is calculated. Usually some guy will say, hey, we had 2 units. We had 2 plays yesterday. We're up 17 units. You grade one play as 1 unit. That's how you can correctly calculate your ROI. So what I mean by that, you look here at Boston yesterday, minus 123. It was a loss. So you lose minus 1.23 units. Previous day, Philadelphia, minus 103. You're wagering 1.03 units. If it wins, you win 1 unit. So in total, this model, and this is why you calculate one play as 1 unit, we've had a total of risk of, for this model, 219 units and netted out 19.66 units for an ROI of 9%. And 9% ROI, that's probably going to, decrease a little bit more as well. Now, the one benefit to this model, the reason I want to go to this model is the fact that it does a lot more volume and it's winning at a fairly decent rate. 106 and 96, let's add this up together. 6 plus 96, it's going to be a little bit more than 50%, but not much. And then we take 106 divided by 202, that's probably 52%. Yeah, boom, 52%. So the model's hitting 52%, but still producing 19.66 units, which I think is a lot better than the model we see over here on the right, just playing the top 6. And considering there's a lot of variance in baseball as well, just a much better approach. And notice the ROI now. I made a video, I think a few days ago, and I was showing the ROI of this model was higher than the ROI of the other model. But because this model here does more volume, it makes it it's a lot better because it's going to produce more units. And right now they're basically even with this model over here doing a little bit more. So if you got two models at the same ROI, which model would be the better model? It would be the model with more volume, because with more volume, you'll make more profit. So hopefully that makes a lot more sense. And I think one other thing I want to add to this is a change I'm going to make. I was wagering, let me show you guys this. I may have shown this chart before, but we'll kind of review this. So one change I'm going to make, I'm going to increase. Normally I was wagering averaging around $1,000 wagered per day. I'm going to increase that to about $2,000. And whatever you do, and I'm going to mention this to clients, you want to be at 10% of your bankroll. So in order to wager $2,000 per day, you would want to have a minimum bankroll of 20 grand. So if you're wagering, say, in order to wager $100 total per day, and that doesn't matter if you've got 5 plays, 10 plays, or 3 plays, you would want to make sure if you're averaging $100 wagered per day, total amount wagered, you want to have at least $1,000 bankroll. And that's kind of what I teach, because more than likely you're going to have more than one play. So you would have to have 10 over days in a row, 10 over days in a row in order to lose all your bankroll. And statistically, that's just not going to happen. Because I want to say this yesterday, having an over day, that was probably that might have been the first over day we've had with baseball, or maybe the second, but we haven't had many. It's the same deal with a sweep. It's just rare to go 4-0, rare to go 5-0. And, likewise, rare to go 0-4, 0-5. So regardless of what you wager bankroll, just the way I teach it, it should be 10% of what you actually have. So if you're going to wager, for example, if you're going to wager $500 per day, you need to have $5,000 in your bankroll. If you're going to wager $1,000 per day, you need to have $1,000. And of course, you can go lower than that, but the whole benefit of that, doing it that way, the way I teach that, if you have a losing day and over day, all you're down is 10% of your bankroll. All right. So anyway, that's a wrap for episode 59. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. A lot more content coming out this week. Hope everybody has a great week. Talk to y'all later. Peace.